All right, so at this point, you've probably already seen Nick's bow setup for this year. So I'm gonna talk about mine, and to start, we'll go with this beautiful tan, I forget the color, I think it's exactly like desert sand, PSE Evo NXT, and I am also shooting the 31-inch axle-to-axle bow. Now Nick and I both came from the Response from a couple years ago, and that's a 33-inch axle-to-axle bow. And for me, both are night and day difference from what I had been shooting, because in the past I was shooting a 26 3/4 axle-to-axle bow. At the time I wanted a really compact setup that I could put on a backpack or take into a blind and not have any issues at all making the shot fit with the limb movement and the cam movement. So I didn't want anything to be hit, but so far this 31-inch makes a giant difference in terms of accuracy. Setup on this bow right now, I'm gonna run the QAD Ultra Rest. It's just your standard drop away rest. I think at the time it was the cheapest one that I had available to me at a pro shop, and I love this thing. Coming from a Whisker Biscuit, again, the drop away rest makes a giant difference just in how quiet the bow is and your accuracy downrange. The sight that I'm running is an IQ bow sight. I'm not exactly sure what model this is, but it's a 5-pin sight. It's got a bubble level in it, and then it obviously has the IQ system in it, which I'll be honest, when I first put this on my bow, I really thought this is gonna make shooting so much more difficult because I'm gonna have an extra thing to think about to try to help me be accurate downrange. And essentially, if you don't know what it is, there's a green dot in the top of the sight, and there's basically like a black dot that you're supposed to center in there based on where your anchor point is through your peep sight as you draw your bow. And that's supposed to help you be consistent with your anchor point and with your sight picture downrange every single time. And I'll be honest, at this point, I hardly even notice that I check it. It's so simple and so fast. Once you get it set up and then you're comfortable drawing your bow like that, you don't ever even think about it. The buck that I shot last year, that was the first thing I checked. I popped up, looked to make sure that that black dot was centered, moved down and checked my level, and then acquired sight picture on the deer at 30 yards and was able to fire a shot off. So I really like this sight. It gives me a little bit of distance compared to what some other sights are at, but I also love the ability to adjust this thing. You don't need Allen wrenches. Once you get your pins set up, as you maybe change something about your bow, maybe add a little bit of draw weight or reduce draw weight, the pins pretty much aren't going to change in their location from 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 yards. But the sight picture, the whole sight might need to move. And this just has little turn dials that once you break the seal on these Allen screws with their manual heads, you can just turn that and it'll adjust it for you on the fly, which I love. It's super simple, and I mean, getting this bow and having put everything on it, I just got close at 20 yards and was able to fine tune in like 4 or 5 arrows and get everything where I needed it to be from 20 on out to my furthest pin at 60 yards. I also have, this is a Trophy Ridge quiver on here. The reason I like it is because of the quick detach feature that it operates under. I've seen people use these online before, and I hunted and hunted and hunted on the internet to try to find one that I thought was gonna work well. I had a quick detach quiver before, but it's the kind that slide up and down on your bow. And I'm not a huge fan of those because it's hard to do with one hand. You kind of have to hold the riser of your bow and hold your quiver steady and then push the lever and slide that quiver out. This bad boy, I can just do with one finger, one hand, no problem. And then it has a locking feature on it too that I slide up and down to lock that quiver in place so I don't have to worry about it moving around. That's what I use to tote the bow and arrows into the woods, whether we're hunting on the ground or hunting in a tree stand. And then once I get to that location, I pop the quiver off, knock an arrow, and I'm ready to go. So that's just how I choose to transport my arrows into the woods. As far as the stabilizer goes, I just have this, it's like a Vibra check. It doesn't really add any weight to the front, but I find that if I take that quiver off and I don't have any extra weight on this bow, I'm pretty balanced as it is. And unlike Nick, who wants to be able to find level pretty easy, that IQ system makes it so easy for me to find that consistent anchor point. And just from muscle memory, I get that bubble level immediately upon drawing the bow. So I don't have to worry about that as much. And then in a hunting situation, I don't shoot near as much target archery as Nick does. I just want to be able to be confident in my setup in the woods on game animals. And so I don't need a giant stabilizer that's going to help me be pinpoint accurate on a 2-inch dot at 80 yards. I just want to be able to kill a deer effectively at 30 yards. So that's why I just run this sound dampening stabilizer on the front. Don't worry about the weight. I have a wrist sling on mine, and I know Nick uses that finger sling and he likes his a lot. We both shoot the open grip, so we're not here torquing on the bow and holding it steady. I just want something that's going to give me a little bit extra confidence. Should I draw my bow back, fire off a shot, and then need something to catch the bow to prevent it from falling all the way to the ground? So I use that wrist sling for mine. Nick took off his grip, and I actually like the grip on mine. The responses didn't have a grip on theirs, and I thought the narrow grip was nice, but it was cold to the touch, that aluminum riser, in super cold temperatures, and you never know when you're going to need the bow to work and your hand to function the way that it should, and you might be hunting in 15 or 10 degree weather sometimes. So having a grip on mine, I think, helps just to get over the mental hump of having to deal with a cold riser. But also the way that they've tapered this grip, it's very narrow front to back and side to side. So I can pretty much wedge that in my hand, no problem. And it's gonna stay just like it would have without a grip in place. So if you have any questions about that, I think there's some statistics on that online that you can find about what a grip does and what it doesn't. But I prefer to have it on mine. Now, when it comes to the extra stuff that we put on our bows, right now I shoot this TrueFire chicken wing release. I love this thing. It's not a true caliper where there's two teeth that clamp on the D-loop of your string. It's very similar to Nick's, where it just has a hook. But this is fairly deep into the back, so that D-loop sits in there. And once I put this on my wrist and I get that on that D-loop, I don't have to worry about applying a bunch of tension to it to try to make sure it stays on. And I also can just let it rest there and hang, no problem, because I know that that channel is deep enough, I'm not going to lose the D-loop. I also like it because in the stand, it's much harder to guide the D-loop straight into two caliper teeth, pinchers, to get it locked in place. For me, I just have to loop it around one side, and it seems much quicker for me. The other thing that I did, it comes with a modification kit. They sell it to you with a single finger trigger, and I added the double finger trigger, so when I draw back and shoot my bow, I'm using both my index and my middle finger to pull the release. Now, what I think that does for me is a lot of guys, because there's not a lot of leverage on a single finger release button or trigger, they tend to punch it because there's no guessing, and it doesn't feel like you have to pull it very far before that thing goes off. For me, getting that extra leverage of using my middle finger, I can feel the travel a lot more, which helps me fine tune exactly where that surprise release point is going to be. And I pull a lot more with my middle finger to release the bow than I do with my index finger. So I love that setup. Something that I think is unique and also very cheap and easy to install. For me personally, I love carrying my bow to the woods with a sling. Now this is just a regular cheap Allen sling that you can get at Walmart for next to nothing. And the thing a lot of people don't like about these, I think, is the way that it installs onto your bow. Because of how confident I am and how often I've used these things, I know exactly that they're gonna work just like I want. And they just simply Velcro around your limbs like that. Now, a lot of people think this is gonna jostle around and bounce and make noise and maybe cause your shot to be different, but I actually think it works almost like a noise dampener. And I've never had any issues with accuracy running this. So with my sling, I have it buckled in and I carry it over my shoulder like that. When I get to the tree stand, I just unbuckle it and I leave that Velcro piece on my limbs, and I'm ready to go for the hunt. I don't even worry about it when I'm in the tree. The final piece that I'm gonna talk about is my arrow setup. And this is worthy of a video in and of itself for me personally. Now, I'm not as tall as Nick, and so I don't have as long of a draw length. We both pull 60 pounds, so that doesn't factor in at all. But I had several years of terrible luck with a light carbon arrow and expandable 100 grain broadheads. You can pick and choose whatever brand you want. I pretty much tried them all and failed miserably with that setup on my bow. And it wasn't that I had horrible shot placement, I just wasn't getting any penetration at all. It didn't matter the distance, it didn't matter whether I was right on the shoulder blade or just behind it. 3 inches, 4 inches of penetration, and I lost a lot of deer that way. So a couple years ago, I, from a pro shop, heard that heavier arrows were going to help me get penetration. So I switched to the FMJs. Now I just shoot the 5mm, which is a fairly narrow shaft, but they have the micro shafts. I don't shoot those. I also don't do anything with the inserts. I just shoot the stock standard inserts. I think it's like a 25 grain insert. And then I run a lighted knock on the back just to help me find the arrow on a pass through after the shot. And I run a 3-blade fixed Wacom broadhead. These are really cool broadheads because the part that gets dinged up the most when you shoot at an animal are the 3 blades themselves. The head is pretty durable and sturdy, so I don't worry about that too much. The blades are actually replaceable, so if you get a ding in one, let's say you shoot it at a target just to check and see where it's flying compared to your field points, which I have done, and you get a nick in one of those head blades, it comes with replacement blades. Just put a new one in and you don't have to worry about changing accuracy or how it flies at all. So I love this setup, just that little bit of extra weight from the carbon wrapped in aluminum that the FMJ offers. I've had nothing but pass-throughs on deer. So I finish my arrows out with a quick fletch. It's cheaper to buy your arrows without the fletchings installed. And even if you do buy arrows with fletchings on them, just shave them off with a knife, and then you can put these on them. And I know that the helical on these is going to be consistent from arrow to arrow without any issues. So that's my bow setup. I am extremely confident in it when it comes to a hunting situation. I wouldn't shoot this probably in a 3D tournament, but I know that I'm going to be able to head out into the woods, rain, snow, sleet or shine, 80 degrees, 0 degrees, and as long as my body is warm and there's a deer in front of me, I'll be able to successfully execute that shot. So if you have any questions about my bow setup in particular, or if you have any questions about exactly what happened and why I made the switch to this heavier arrow, shoot me a message and we'll do our best to answer those questions. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next video. Thanks, guys.